Recently, I'm not sure what the context was exactly, but I had heard someone quoted as saying, never let a perfectly good crisis go to waste. Actually, I do remember now what the context was. It was in an investment seminar, and the whole idea is that in crisis, opportunities get presented if we know where to look and how to take advantage of those. And more than that hit me kind of going through these last couple of years in the financial crisis as part of my business. When that person quoted that, what happened is that resonated to me in my life, because that is my story. My story is really born out of crisis, and God's using crisis in my life to take me to where He's gotten me today. And let me tell you what I mean. Back the first time I can remember actually ever having a crisis was when I was a freshman in high school. And the guy who had been my best friend all the way up through elementary school had become, by the end of my freshman year, had become the biggest drug dealer and drug user in my high school. In fact, he would use my locker, our shared locker, as a little storage facility, which made me a little nervous. And I grew up in a family that, not necessarily a strong Christian family, but a very moral family, and I knew that wasn't going to fly. And it left me feeling very lonely, very isolated, and in this sense of relational crisis. And it was at that time, a guy that some of you know, and some of you met last night for the first time, Todd Harper, befriended me. He was a friend on my high school football team. And as I was going through this crisis, he suggested to me that my life might be better off with Jesus in it. And so I went to the basement of his church and watched what I call a Christian horror film from the book of Revelations about the end of the world and what happens to those people who don't know Jesus. And I became convinced that it was probably a good idea for me to receive Jesus into my heart. So God actually used that crisis, that initial crisis in my life, to draw me to Himself. So now fast forward 25 years. 39 years old. At the time, this is 4 years ago. 39 years old. I've been married for, a bunch of years. Got a great wife. Had 2 kids. Had a successful financial planning and investment business in Naperville, Illinois. I was an elder in my church. I had good balance in my life, it seemed like. I had plenty of time to go and play golf and mess around with the kids. And from the outside looking in, my life is exactly what I would have wanted or what I would have dreamt of. But I was bored out of my mind. And if what I had accomplished was the American dream, I thought, America can keep it. I didn't really want that. And I had a conversation with my wife around the topic, and she said, well, I'm really kind of bored too, and it's with you. No, she didn't say it. But it left me in a kind of a weird place. And I had stayed in touch with my buddy Todd over the years, and I called him up and I said, hey, Todd, I'm bored. I said, I don't know what it means to be in midlife crisis, but I think I'm in one. And, he kind of laughed like only a friend can do. And I said, well, be honest with me. Aren't you bored? And he said, no. He said, and the reason I'm not bored is, he said, because I'm part of this generous giving thing that I've told you about several times that you'll never come to the conferences of. And I keep getting to see people's lives transformed around this idea of giving, and in this giving process becoming more generous. That's cool. And he said, in fact, there's a movement going on, and this thing is scaling up, and I really need some help. And he said, you are one of the 3 guys that keeps coming to mind as I've been praying about who I could hire to help us out with this thing. And I thought to myself, yeah, I'm going to help you out, helping people become generous. My mission in life is to help rich people get richer and further isolated from God because they don't need Him. They're financially independent. That's my job. And it's funny because as those thoughts went through my head, it made me very sad. That this is what my what all my training and my life's mission had turned into was really assisting people in becoming more isolated from God. And I said, you know, Todd, I don't even know how I would contemplate your offer. The implications of that would be huge. Selling my half of my business to my partner, the decrease in the income, how that would affect our lifestyle, where I might have to move the family. I don't even know how to take that into my grid and contemplate your offer. Though I'm honored by the thought that maybe I could fit into the cool stuff you're doing here. He said, well, I don't expect you to make a decision today. He said, but I would like you to do two things. And one is to put yourself in a position of surrender before God prayerfully. And then come to one of our conferences and meet some of the folks that I get to hang out with. And so that summer, my wife Rochelle and I started to pray a prayer of surrender, which we hadn't done probably since I graduated from college. And I kind of laid everything I didn't have on the table and say, like Bob Coy, hey, I got nothing, so here it is, God. It's all yours. It's very easy to do then. Very difficult to do this time around. And then we ended up going in fall of 2006, Rochelle and I got on a plane and went to Portland, Oregon, to sit in a room not unlike this, at a table like you're sitting at, and listen to these stories of people whose lives had been changed. People who are giving away 50 or 90% of their income. And my wife and I are looking across the table at each other going, these people are nuts. But they're telling their stories so convincingly with these big smiles on their faces. We're like, either they've drank the Kool-Aid hard or something is going on here. And then I got to meet some of these people, some of the most joyful people I've ever met in my life. And it became very intriguing and appealing and attractive to me. But I still didn't really know how to compute how to go forward, because the whole thought of coming to work for an organization like this, I don't know. It was just out there. Then Randy Alcorn stood up and he said, he gave a quote from the Treasure Principle, or Money, Possessions, and Eternity, and says, God prospers us not to increase our standard of living, but to raise our standard of giving. That's different. And then I thought, how can I go from where I'm at? Because I thought that I had already kind of reached nirvana. We'd been faithful tithers. I thought that was the end goal. That was the finish line. I had reached, I'm a generous guy. Until I heard really generous people. And then I realized I can't go to work for generous giving. I'm not a generous person. What am I going to do? Just go and tell people about what I'm not? Hey, don't be like me. So my wife and I actually made a very profound, for us, decision that weekend. We went back to our hotel room and I told her exactly what I just told you. I don't even know how to process this. This whole thing of lifestyle and money makes so much noise in my life that I can't even contemplate it. The only way that we could figure what to do is that we were going to set a finish line for ourselves and do a 6-month experiment, which was to cap our income from my business at what I would have been making roughly at generous giving, and then give the rest away. 6 months, not a high-risk proposition. We just thought we'd do it and see if we could do it and see what would happen. So we did that. That weekend we made that decision, came home. I started a little giving fund. Didn't know how to give, So as this giving fund built up, every morning during my exercise routine, I'd spend 15 minutes on the treadmill walking and reading a book about giving. And I've read a bunch of really great books, some of the authors of which are in this room. And then I'd spend 15 minutes in a listening posture before God saying, what do you want me to do with this stuff that's piling up over here? That's where the adventure really began. And what has been so cool about it is that being in that posture of listening and dependence as a steward of this recognition that really what I've been given, the question of ownership, that it's not really mine, that was just mind-blowing to me, because what I discovered, what I had before, was not a stewardship so much of God's stuff. I had a profit-sharing plan with God. He got his 10%. I got my 90. I did what I wanted. In a good year, I'd give him a little bonus, share the love a little with some missionaries or something, But this was a whole different deal. And what happened is, over the course of that next year and in that listening process, that interaction with God I began to actually learn to hear the voice of God and then respond to the promptings and get to see God in action. So we went to that conference in 06. In 07, Generous Giving came to Chicago, and I heard a couple stand up, and they had one of these really cool testimonies where they were asking God what they should give, and they were asking God independently, and she got a number, and he got a number. It was the exact same number, and it was for everything, law, heavens opened, and I was just like, I looked at Rochelle, I was like, I want a cool story like that. And so it came to the end of the year offering at our church. We call it Seeds, and it's really what provides the seeds money for our missions program. And typically in our church, it's been the same 100 families every year that participate in this thing. But prior to us going public with it in the church, the elders and the deacons and the pastors are expected to make their pledges. And so I've got Rochelle praying, I'm praying, and we've got this 3-week period of time before these numbers are due to the head of our deacon board. So every day at 10:30, kids have gone off to school. Rochelle's had time for her quiet time. I had my time on the treadmill in the morning. I call her up and say, hey, what's the number? What's the number? I don't got the number. I don't got the number either. All the way down to literally until day 2 before this number's due. Also, I had my secretary praying for the number. Called my wife and she said, I don't have a number, she said, but here's what we need to do. She said, I'm absolutely convinced of this, that we need to do a matching gift for people that have never given to the seeds offering, and we'll match them dollar for dollar, whatever they give. And I'm like, that's good, except that we don't have that much money set aside to do a big matching gift. And then literally, I hung up the phone. 2 minutes later, my assistant, Connie, walks in and she says, hey, I got the number. I said, oh yeah, what's the number? She said, it's $25,000. I said, well, that's interesting. Called my wife and I said, hey, honey, Connie's got the number, you got the idea. The problem is we got $7,000 in our checking account and our giving fund is empty. I don't really know what to do with this. And Rochelle said, well, you don't think God can do that? Of course God can do that. What am I going to say, Of course God can do that. So I called up the head of the deacon board and I said, hey, Kevin, here's the deal. We're going to make this pledge. It's going to be a matching gift dollar for dollar for people who've never given before. We want to encourage people to give, and it's up to $25,000. And one problem, we don't have the money. He said, okay, so that's a creative way of going at this thing. We'll fake them out. I said, no, I'd expect to have it, at the end of the first quarter or something. So if you give me a little time to run with you, and he said, that'd be fine. And so I went home that day, and I was thinking, I was kind of actually enthused about this fact that I was going to maybe see God show up and do something cool, so I'd have a neat story to tell. And literally, I kid you not, I walk in the next morning, and on my desk, there is a note, one of those little pink things, a phone call I got from one of my bigger clients. Call him up, say, hey, Bob, what's going on? Bob says, hey, listen, I was just meeting with my estate planning attorney, and he said that I need some insurance for my estate plan. Yeah? What do you need? I need $8 million of second-to-die life insurance. I said, I'd like you to do it for me. Okay, love to. So we go through the process, find out later on that day, guess what the commission is on this thing? It's not $25,000. I got a business partner. It's $52,000. $26,000 of it is mine. God gave me a $1,000 bonus over and above the $25,000. What's been so cool in this journey over the last, oh, by the way, we continued the experiment for whatever it's been now, 3.5 years. Love living like we're living. I got to tell you, we are more free now financially than we've ever been. Even through the grinding guts of that downturn over the last couple of years in the financial markets, which, as you may guess, affects an investment business like mine, there was very little fear, which is amazing in and of itself. I've got to see really a lot of the ugly parts of myself as I peeled back God has peeled back these layers of the onion. I've seen all kinds of greed and envy and gross stuff in me, but more than ever, I've seen God's grace in my life. And I understand more clearly today what I'm being saved from than I ever have. So a lot of that has to do with this whole thing of taking this adventure, this journey towards generosity. And I'm very grateful for this organization and the people that God uses here to lead people like me and folks like you to really a life-giving message, to be not financially independent, but financially free. Thanks.